But I mean, obviously, I've known Chuppa forever. He's a great guy. It's so fun to see this resurgence he's had in Scarlet and Violet that literally started at the beginning of it, where he finished second place to G-Sock Lee at the first regional of the new era in San Diego last year, and ever since that January. So we've had, you know, just over a calendar year, pretty much, of just straight dominance from Chuppa at every event he goes to, and it's great to see that he's performing so well.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, it's a really difficult game right now with just the sheer amount of players. So to be able to see consistency coming out, I think is just absolutely key to really just showcase that skill. I mean, it's not that anyone can win a regional, because no, you need so much skill to do that too, right? But be able to see consistency over time, I just think is absolutely massive. But our players on stage, time to talk about things a little bit. Don't worry, that Dragonair, it's fully evolved
just
there.
Evolved in front of our eyes.
It's crazy. Getting it ready for the big battle ahead of it, right?
Also, shout outs to Scott's Porygon too, as Evan was mentioning at the earlier on.
That one's not evolving.
That is intentionally not evolved, holding the Eviolite item. But Scott is one of the innovators of this format of how you're using Porygon 2 in this. You know, I think it was a Pokemon that people were very excited for when the DLC came out, but we're trying to find a way to use it effectively. So we'll see what Chuppa has going on his side, and there is the Dragonite plush matching on his team.
Well, we talked a lot about Solo Dozo, and that is what Chuppa is going to be running. So you have that Dondozo, no Tatsugiri in sight, being that bulky water on the team. Having the Tinglu too with that Vessel of Ruin, you can really just kind of slow down the damage that's being done. But it isn't all just about the defense on this team, which I think can be the issue when you're falling into Tinglu Dondozo teams. There are so many offensive options here. You have that Gouging Fire and that Dragonite. This one notably choice band with Outrage. We might not see the move because it could be a risk to click, but this Dragonite, this is all offensive, and I love it.
And Tinglu, famously known for smashing its giant head into the ground and creating a fissure, as we learned in the Pokedex entry earlier today. But those howls from the booster energy Gouging Fire is going to be really important in this matchup. Now, Chuppa actually played Pokemon on Japanese television, and he was dubbed, quote, the Brooklyn Supercomputer. That's about as cool of a nickname as you can get.
Yeah, how good of Pokemon do you have to play to be dubbed a supercomputer?
I mean,
guess,
Chuppa is Brooklyn, let's be real. Like,
fair.
This
That's
is
an analogy.
I wish I was in the meeting when they were writing up the lower thirds for that Japanese TV show. It's like, how do we effectively tell the audience what this Pokemon player is? And Brooklyn Supercomputer is that is Chuppa across the fourth.
I feel like that just puts like such a big wow, you expect, maybe we'll put that up to a 35% chance to win the Vancouver Regional Championships with a nickname like that. But of course, there's a lot of talented players out there, and we got to talk a little bit more about Scott here. We're talking about that Roaring Moon. I know it's up and down. We don't necessarily see it the most, but he will be donning that on his team. Not Tailwind, instead Dragon Dance, Acrobatics, Knockoff. Make sure you can do the most damage as possible with it.
And the Porygon having access to Terra Blast, if you're used to prior generations of Pokemon, or are trying to go for other normal attacks, or even the Ice Beam and Thunderbolt strategies, Terra Blast is actually really strong on Porygon. As a normal type Pokemon, you can just click Terra Blast normally and get a same type attack bonus. It also does change depending on if your attack or special attack is higher there. But so you have normal type usage out of Terra Blast, and then when it terrestrializes into a poison type, that's super effective Terra Blast into the potential Ogerpon Wellspring on the other side.
Fun fact for Scott, first time on stream after competing for 8 years. First time on stream. This is the thing, we can't showcase everyone, but I'm excited that we do get to showcase Scott after all this time, and we get to see that potential winning in for him too here in Vancouver. Love the plushie game, for example. If this is the battle right here, I think Scott's won this one outright.
Yeah, for sure. He's got multiple plushes. So just on the count, the plush count alone, he's got more than Chuppa. But this should be a really fun match. Scott is a well-respected player, but he's going up against one of the best players in the world right now.
100% starting off, it will be the Incineroar and the Golden Go coming up from Scott's end. A round of Intimidate. Make sure the Qianpao's attack does drop. Of course, Dragonite won't be falling to that because of that inner focus and a way to pressure with that Golden Go. But Chuppa, this is a really offensive start from his end too.
Yeah, so much of Chuppa's value on this team and how he can you know, try to get knockouts is around this Dragonite. Dragonite not being hindered by the Intimidate, just having strong choice band damage with the Sword of Ruin next to it, thanks to Chien Pao's ability, means you can output a lot of physical damage, but you can't extreme speed into Golden Go as a ghost type. So that means Chuppa is gonna have to lock into something else if he wants to, and then if you can try to get some early damage now, you can try to preserve Dragonite for later when things are chipped down, and then go for the extreme speed sweep.
Well, this Dragonite definitely has powerful moves into the opposing end. So does this Chien Pao, but Incineroar going to be swapping out. And the hit into the Amoonguss, holding that Rocky Helmet, is going to deal a little bit of chip. That will break the Focus Sash over on the Chien Pao and deal a little damage to the Dragonite as well. First round of Make It Rain coming out, taking care of that Chien Pao quite handedly, bringing the Dragonite down real low.
Beautiful defensive play from Scott with that Rocky Helmet Amoonguss, a Pokemon that has just been so tried and true throughout the history of competitive Pokemon. Being able to do damage without actually attacking because of the Rocky Helmet, and then since Chien Pao is so frail, gets knocked out. Golden Go does have to sacrifice one of its stages of special attack because of the Make It Rain, but Scott has the flexibility to move around. He has the Incineroar, which is great at pivoting in the back, so if at any point he feels like Golden Go's damage output is not high enough anymore, he can swap it out to reset that special attack stat. Does also have access to Nasty Plot, so you can Rage Powder with the Amoonguss to try to boost up that special attack.
It's definitely a game of risk and reward here, because you don't want that Pokemon to be sitting out and then potentially be targeted down with a powerful move coming out from the other end, because that Wellspring Ogerpon in its current form cannot be redirected by that Amoonguss. Swap from the Dragonite, locked in that Stomping Tantrum, will be bringing in the Tinglu instead. So if the Golden Go did try to go for the offensive, pick off that Dragonite, well, it would just be another stage of lowered special attack. Ivy Cudgel into the Protect this time around, and the Amoonguss with no Rage Powder will be actually targeting into the slot. The Sludge Bomb into the Tinglu will be nothing but a tickle, but hey, it's still funny to see the Mushroom go on the offensive.
Yeah, so Chuppa is all in on the anti-Golden Go train right now, not only with Ogerpon Wellspring, which is typically trained very bulky on its special defense, and if it terrestrializes, increases its special defense by 1 stage, and then the Tinglu with the Vessel of Ruin, lowering all special attack on the field by 1 stage. So multiple ways to just try to stop Scott from doing damage with his Golden Go.
No swap out over on Scott's end of things, and we are seeing the Terastallization, the first one of the battle, and it will be that Ogerpon Wellspring into that Wellspring form. You're going to get the Embody aspect and get that special defense boost here, but you do drop that Grass typing, so you can be directed away from that Amoonguss on the horizon. But it's going to be the Ivy Cudgel trying to just deal the damage that it can into this Golden Go slot, bringing it down real low thanks to that critical hit. Nasty Plot is set up, trying to make sure that it can have that special attack to go on the offensive, +1 at this moment, while Taunt from the Amoonguss. No redirection this turnaround. Next turnaround, it is going to be shut down, but the Pollen Puff, that'll help heal up its partner.
2 great plays in a row from Scott, anticipating either the Terastallization or a Taunt on the other side from Tinglu, saying there's probably not a good chance that I get a Spore or Rage Powder off in this area. So now Golden Go has gotten a Nasty Plot boost and is brought back up well over 50% of its HP, all because Scott was anticipating the attacks coming in that direction. Now Amoonguss is able to Rage Powder into this the Ogerpon because it is a pure water type.
We can't quite yet, so this is going to put it in a bit of a precarious situation thanks to that taunt coming out from the Tinglu. So do have to be careful here. We'll have to swap to reset. Something like with the potential fake out next turn could be super nice. That will be the Incineroar being brought in. So you can make sure that the Golden Go could potentially stay safe if you want to try and protect it this time around. Intimidate 2 will drop the Ivy Cudgel on opposing end by a lowered attack stage. As it will be coming out, but this time it will be into the Incineroar. Super effective, not enough for the KO.
Yeah, that is intimidated damage there. No critical hit means Incineroar just barely hangs on in that slot. But here is a Make It Rain into both, but because of Vessel of Ruin and Embody aspect, it does nothing.
Sure, that 1 stage of special attack seemed nice, but it's not going to help you. There is now Incineroar, trapped by the quicksands, trapped in on the field. It's going to be brought real low, won't be killed this turn around. But hey, you get 1 turn to do something with that Incineroar before it's gone for good.
Yeah, you can either fake out into one of these two slots if you really are. If you want to just stop one of their attacks, you probably have to decide which attack is more important to stop. Probably the Ivy Cudgel, since it does have the access or the opportunity to critically hit against it. But if you leave Ting Lu to its own devices, it can Sand Tomb the Golden Go as well. And now, since you know Incineroar is being knocked out at the end of from the Sand Tomb this next turn, you can try to focus down some damage onto the Golden Go.
Especially too when you're looking at this spiky shield protect coming out from Chuppa's end. You can make sure that there is no potential fake out, but also no parting shot to try and reposition to escape your fate. Fake out, that will be the move of choice into the spiky shield. It will mean that it will take that damage. We won't even have to wait for the end of the turn for it to get KO'd here. But an opportunity now for the Golden Go, the passive turn from Chuppa. It can go for a nasty plot. Get another special attack boost. This should be at a +2 now.
And that's where you get punished for playing defensively in a very obvious double protect scenario where Ting Lu could have went for the Sand Tomb into the Golden Go slot. Instead, Amoonguss Regenerator's ability will increase its HP, so it's going to be even more health to get through. And Golden Go got another nasty plot boost. Now that Amoonguss is no longer taunted, this Rage Powder does redirect away any attacks from Ogerpon.
It'll only be able to do that the one time around, though, with taunt targeting into that Ivy Cudgel, hitting into the Amoonguss, just doing a little fair amount of damage. Make it rain at the +2 right now. Will be enough to take down the Ting Lu, so Amoonguss won't be taunted this turn, and we'll have an opportunity to keep the Golden Go safe going on forward. That's a huge KO.
That is a huge KO because he was able to nasty plot for free the prior turn on the double protect. It gave Golden Go enough damage to knock out the Ting Lu, and as you mentioned, Ting Lu does not get the taunt onto Amoonguss, meaning Amoonguss is free to continue to Rage Powder against Chuppa's team. He's down to just these two Pokemon remaining. Dragonite has to lock into something. You'd argue it's probably better to lock into Stomping Tantrum for both Golden Go and a neutral hit into Amoonguss, but then you don't have priority.
It's so tough because you do need to be locking into something, but you also need to be dealing with these Amoonguss on the opposing end. Going for the Rage Powder, the Spiky Shield, I like that. Try and make sure that Pokemon stays safe. And if the Dragonite's not going to stick around much longer anyways, because of the Make It Rain, might as well get rid of this threat. That will be picking up the KO onto the Amoonguss. Now, the Dragonite has to be taking a hit from this Golden Go. Another round of Make It Rain.
Yeah, so the Dragonite is already low HP, so Make It Rain is going to be enough to knock it out. Lowering Golden Go's special attack yet another stage, so kind of neutralize the amount of Make It Rains versus the 2 times that Nasty Plot has been clicked. That means that Scott's Golden Go does have a pretty low special attack right now and is forced to stay on the field since he only has 2 Pokemon remaining.
Regardless, still such a tough situation. The Golden Go, if I'm correct, should be at about neutral right about now with all the drops and all the nasty plots it's gotten. And with Porygon 2 freshly joining the field at full health and already on the opposing end, the Ogerpon at half, it's going to be such a tough situation. Protect on this turn, but the Ivy Cudgel targeted into the Porygon 2 slot, trying to get as much done as possible, but we already got to have that round of Intimidate from earlier on. The attack is dropped, and now the speed's not even in this Ogerpon's favor either, thanks to the Trick Room from the Porygon 2.
Yeah, Eviolite putting in work for this Porygon to set up the Trick Room, since both Porygon 2 and Golden Go are traditionally slower than the Ogerpon Wellspring. That now gives Scott, for the next 4 turns, his 2 Pokemon will be attacking before the Ogerpon can, so you can try to do, you know, your damage with both the Terra Blast and Shadow Ball into the Ogerpon before it's able to try to get critical hits with the Ivy Cudgel.
Porygon 2, the Terra Poison coming out, the big skull on its head, being able to go for a Terra Blast now in this moment. Porygon 2 not necessarily known for its offensive capabilities, so ever not going to be able to pick up the KO, but we knew that with the Twisted Dimensions, the Golden Go would be next to act, and that will be more than enough to claim Scott the first win in this best of 3.
Yeah, Scott 1 win away from making it into day 2 here in Vancouver, and this is an exciting matchup where pretty solid showing against Chuppa in this first game, especially since the Golden Go had multiple Make It Rains that just felt like they weren't doing a lot of damage. You know, you got one knockout on a 12 HP Pokemon and maybe some resisted damage into the Ogerpon as well. But because he was able to stay on the field for so long, the Nasty Plots were able to even out the Make It Rain drops. And I think that's something Chuppa is going to have to look at going into Game 2 for adjustments is, even if it is chip damage from the Make It Rain, all damage is very valuable when you have such an offensive team on Chuppa's side and not a lot of defensive switching capability.
Well, I think it all comes down to that first turn as well, because there's the attempt at hitting into the partner slot for that Golden Go there, and all of a sudden hitting into an Amoonguss with that Rocky Helmet. So you could get KO'd by that first Make It Rain, and that Chien Pao being a way to deal damage and also help your teammates deal damage. We really got to see that Chuppa just did not deal enough damage at any point. Even when we got to see the critical hits, not quite enough to be KOing the Golden Go and taking them down. And even just one round of Intimidate from the Incineroar. Sure, the Incineroar took a bunch of damage. That's a super effective hit. It's all about the damage it could do later on, and unfortunately, it just wasn't there.
And I think if Chuppa's going to play a slow defensive game against Scott's team here and allow the Golden Go to get multiple Nasty Plots to use its Make It Rain, one adjustment could be the Gouging Fire on the team. Because of that booster energy, it's going to be very fast and be able to attack first, either giving it a Howl to say your Ogerpon or your Dragonite, your Choice Band Dragonite, boosting their attack stat, or even on the other end, Breaking Swipe to lower attack on the other side. But of course, you would have a Fire type that would resist Make It Rain from the Golden Go, so you're pressuring Scott more there, and you're able to hit it super effectively with the Heat Crash. So might be something that Chuppa might want to consider for an adjustment, and of course Scott has to be aware of a potential Gouging Fire switch-in.
Especially too, this Golden Go is not a Dragon Terrestrialization to potentially be resisting those sort of hits, but instead Fairy. So at the end of it, you're at worst, hitting neutral into it with a Pokemon that already deals a lot of damage, like this Gouging Fire. Sure, the Fairy will mean you can't hit it with the Break and Swipe, but those Heat Crash, you could safely fire off one of those into the slot. So I'll definitely be interested to see whereabout this gets adjusted on Chuppa's end for this game too, because on paper, the Gouging Fire matches up really well into a lot of things on Scott's team, especially if the Landorus isn't going to make an appearance. Golden Go and Incineroar back to the same lead for Scott to start off game 2, whereas on Chuppa's end, right away, leading with that Wellspring Ogerpon and the adjustment, Gouging Fire.
It just makes so much sense to bring Gouging Fire here because Intimidates are not as detrimental into this specific set on Gouging Fire. You have Howl. Both of Chuppa's Pokemon on the field are physical attackers right now. They're both also faster traditionally than Scott's Pokemon, so you are able to activate that Howl, increase both of their attack stats to negate the Incineroar's Intimidate, and then at that point, you can continue to stack up the Howls, or if you really are threatened by the Golden Go, if you don't want to set up Nasty Plots, there is a Heat Crash waiting to go into that Golden Go slot at any time. So this is a much better lead for Chuppa than he had in Game 1 because Scott's Golden Go is immediately pressured, as is Amoonguss.
And the swap out over on Scott's end, but with that stage of lowered attack on Chuppa's end, a Howl on the horizon, that's going to make sure that these Pokemon are neutral and allow this Ivy Cudgel to hit for what is full effect, but no crit. Just going to be dealing just above half to that Pokemon. Shadow Ball in return, just trying to do as much damage as possible. There's been the adjustment for Scott's end, but I think if Chuppa is still allowed to be howling and attacking with these Pokemon, that it can get dangerous really fast.
Yeah, there's two ways. If Scott does not swap his Golden Go or protect it in this spot, you can either get the Howl boost on on the Ogerpon to make sure its Ivy Cudgel does enough, as we see it just does barely under 50% damage, or you could get the Ivy Cudgel crit and then try to go for an attack from Gouging Fire into Amoonguss. For right now, Ogerpon is really not comfortable enough to Terrestrialize for the Embody aspect to help it against Golden Go, because once you Terrestrialize, you lose the Spore immunity.
The fact that Chuppa with his Pokemon naturally has some speed on his end, and the Golden Go being so potentially threatened by something like a Heat Crash coming out from that Gouging Fire, not surprised to see the Porygon 2 coming into the field, and not surprised to see the Terrestrialization either. Water type. Make sure that if there is a Heat Crash headed your way, it is going to be a resisted hit. Spiky Shield on the Wellspring Ogerpon. Nothing going to be headed its way. Its turn as the Heat Crash. No setup anymore. That's just going to be a negligible amount of damage. That's going to be just Chip now posted in return on top of the Spore coming out.
Yeah, great turn from Scott. They're terrestrializing the Amoonguss. You might have thought on Chuppa's end, he would have tried to save terrestrialization for a more quote-unquote important target like Porygon 2 or Golden Go, but deciding to Terra right away with the Amoonguss keeps it alive from the Gouging Fire, and it stops potential howls where Chuppa could have tried for 2-3 turns consecutively to howl onto the Ogerpon. Now he can't do that.
The thing with terrestrialization, though, is you get out of one weakness, but you're going to find another. The Horn Leech into the Amoonguss will deal a good amount of damage and allow you to recover what damage you are taking from that Rocky Helmet. Sludge Bomb, not quite enough. And there it is. Porygon 2 will be a Trick Room to make sure going on forward, things are good for him.
Now it's time to sweep with Amoonguss at this point.
Yeah.
You got Trick Room set up. You know that Sludge Bomb actually did a lot of damage to the Ogerpon there, and you know it's such low HP at this point that you can either, just go for that knockout and then do something else with your Porygon targeting down Terra Blast into the Gouging Fire slot. Chuppa does have to be careful because if you try to swap out either of these two Pokemon, they are at risk of being taunted, or excuse me, of being put to sleep by Spore, since there is no taunt anymore since Ting Lu is not on the field.
Well, at this point, Amoonguss, we're not putting Pokemon to sleep anymore. We're putting them to rest, just going on the offensive. Little damage this time around, but it was going to be adding up, especially with the Terra Blast doing a lot more into the Gouging Fire. Will wake up the second turn around, though, Breaking Swipe just to do a little bit of chip.
But he also left Ogerpon alone, meaning that it's going to be able to get an attack off on this turn. If you go for the hit, Gouging Fire knocks itself out. If you go for the hit into Amoonguss, you might be able to knock it out. Or you have Dragonite Extreme Speed as well. Extreme Speed doesn't care about Trick Room.
No, we had a space. It's over. It's gone. This turn is done.
No, I know. But I'm
you're
saying,
going forward. Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry about the Ogerpon point. Yeah, I was the Dragonite though. More importantly, has Extreme Speed, doesn't care about Trick Room in this spot. But then you have to lock into Extreme Speed. There's always a chance regenerating. You might want to swap Amoonguss out anyway to recover that HP, and in comes the Ghost type Golden Go.
That's the thing. There's no way to really be stopping the priority over from Chuppa's end of the field here with the Dragonite. So even when the speed is in your favor, meaning the dimensions in your favor with the Trick Room, you still have to be worried of this. And this is going to be dealing a lot of damage. There's a Terra Normal as well to do the most, but it will be a swap from the Amoonguss. Golden Go coming in, so if there was an attempt at Extreme Speed in that spot, it would have done nothing, but a target in the other one, super safe.
Yeah, we're going to have to find out as it's finally time for Chuppa to match the terrestrialization Terra Normal. You probably don't Terra Normal if you're not going to try to go for boosted extreme speed damage, but it also does get rid of that 4 times weakness to ice that Porygon has the Ice Beam for.
Attempted the double spiky shield, not going to happen this time around as extreme speed coming out into the Porygon 2, just dealing a little bit. As Terra Blast in response is going to be more than enough to take care of the Ogerpon this time around.
Chuppa had to go for that spiky shield, just try to delay the inevitable at this point. 30% chance is better than the 0% chance where it just gets knocked out like we saw on that turn. So now Chuppa is down to his last 2 Pokemon. Sword of Ruin is active, but since Chuppa can no longer switch out, that means Dragonite is stuck clicking Extreme Speed for the rest of the game, meaning at no point can Dragonite damage this Golden Go. That's going to be Qianpao's job, is to do the damage into Golden Go. You have Sucker Punch, you have Extreme Speed, so Trick Room's not the end of the world, but if you can make it out of Trick Room these next couple of turns, then the speed advantage goes back to Chuppa's side.
Well, it's so tricky with the Golden Go too, because the only way that you can really be hitting it is with an Ice Spinner that's not necessarily too effective, or with a Sucker Punch that does rely on the Golden Go going on the offensive. And the Porygon 2, we definitely see can be chipping away. So Extreme Speed coming out is just going to be to deal some damage in the Porygon 2. It is actually going to be enough this time with that Sword of Ruin to take care of that Pokemon, bringing the Pokemon just a little bit closer. Nasty Plot coming out for the Golden Go here. That is going to be around a special attack raise for it as Ice Spinner. Just an attempt to try and chip away a little bit at this Pokemon.
Oof, that Nasty Plot's going to help it do way more damage, obviously boosting its special attack, but that could have been free damage on that prior turn to potentially bring Qianpao down to its focus sash. So Scott trying to trade away current upfront damage for future damage on this turn. You have Incineroar with Fake Out. Can't do it onto Dragonite, obviously. But you can do it onto Chien-Pao. And you have Amoonguss in the back with Rocky Helmet to break a Focus Sash for Chien-Pao and also a Rage Powder.
Tempted to Fake Out, but protect on the Chien-Pao to make sure the sash is not broken this time around. His extreme speed locked, of course, will be targeting into that Incineroar. Doesn't have a choice, brings it right down into the red. Not quite enough for the one-hit KO, but will make sure that it is low. Can pick it off next turn easily, even after that berry recovery. Make it rain. Coming out, nothing into the Chien-Pao, but this should deal a good amount of damage into the Dragonite. That's actually enough damage for that clean one-hit KO.
Yeah, that was +2 Make It Rain that time around. Hadn't had the stats lowered, and now Chuppa is down to just his Chien-Pao left on the field against 3 Pokemon. Trick Room has expired, but the question is, who do you target? Because both Golden Go and Incineroar can hit Chien-Pao super effectively.
At this point, I think it's done, it's gone. Chuppa, recognizing it as well, is going to be throwing in the towel, and that is going to be Scott to take this series in a 2-0. First time on stream in 8 years, 100% win rate. I'd say that's pretty good.
That's a pretty good stat, but obviously Scott wants more wins on stream. He wants to be the Vancouver regional champion, and I like his chances moving on into day 2 tomorrow, beating Chuppa Cross, one of the best players in North America. That has to be in a pretty decisive 2-0. You know, I might say. I think that has be a pretty big confidence booster for Scott.
Oh, 100%. I think pretty early on, kind of whittling Chuppa out of options, and it felt tough because it was just so well positioned. Because, okay, well, you need to kind of protect on this turn to not get faked out, but then also now there's a Golden Go that's going to set up in your face. So the next turn, like, you're also not in a great spot, and it was just really, really well done by Scott. I mean, Chuppa still opportunities to be making his way into day 2. And we definitely know the caliber of players, so he definitely can. But Scott in this one definitely deserves all the praise in this world because this was a very clean match.
Yeah, I think just like the knife's edge that this game lays on, because if the turn where he terastallizes into Amoonguss and Chuppa wakes up and goes for a Howl instead to boost Ivy Cudgel damage, or goes for even just another play in general, it might really change the way the game has went. But Rocky Helmet means Chuppa knocks out his own Gouging Fire, no longer able to Howl. And it really did seem like it was Ogerpon was the best strategy against Scott's team. But this Porygon in both games was really good, setting up Trick Room in a matchup where you might have really thought you didn't necessarily need it too much. But when it was Ogerpon, and especially when Chien-Pao was on the field, that Trick Room ended up being crucial.
I think the Trick Room was actually quite nice in that, to make sure that you're in a good spot, because you want to make sure, especially when you're looking and staring down the Gouging Fire, the Wellspring Ogerpon, it can deal significant amount of damage, even when they're resisted hits or just neutral, or even after a round of Intimidate. It still actually adds up. So being able to secure with the Trick Room, kind of just making sure Chuppa didn't really have the option to just try and hit, like, you know, the wham bam, like, I'll hit you once with the Ivy Cudgel, I'll hit you the second time with the Heat Crash, and we're gonna be done here. You get the Trick Room, you get the stuff in your, you get the whole game in your dimension. It just works out so much better for you.
Yeah, and I think, you know, looking at Chuppa's team composition, could have just been in an unfortunate team matchup here where Chuppa has so many offensive Pokemon, and it's kind of a play style that Chuppa is used to. We see many times Chuppa's run into events where he's got 5 fully offensive Pokemon and then an Amoonguss or something like that. So this time around you have Dondozo, who never came into the matchup, and then Ting Lu, that really didn't do too much in the game 1. So ended up not bringing either of them in that second game. So you had your 4 just fully offensive, you know, all gas, no brakes Pokemon. And when you play against a slow, you know, more pivot, more, you know, balanced, or for lack of a better word, like a more well-rounded team, not just too offensive, not too defensive, Porygon 2, Amoonguss with Terra Water, Incineroar to switch in and Intimidate, right? Those things that slow the pace of the game. Chuppa can't afford to play a 7-8 long or turn long match. He wants the game over as quick as possible, and it was a tough matchup.
Well, especially too, since Scott's team isn't just about like the slow, the steady. It's not like I'm just gonna slowly swap in my Incineroar, we'll swap it back out, we'll swap it back in. Having the Golden Go there really, really pressures, because one wrong turn, one passive turn, that can sometimes be the detriment of a team that has like those pieces like the Porygon 2 and the Incineroar, is they can be a little too slow and your opponent can get momentum. But making sure that, okay, I have this nasty plot, so I can be stepping on the gas here. I can go for these make it rains, even without. Golden Go hits for so much damage.
Yeah.
So Chuppa is just kind of in a tough spot there. So I think this is just really, really well done. It's a team that's been kind of seen. There's been players picking up in these pieces for a reason. Like, this is just a really solid core 6.
And the Golden Go has Metal Coat, right, as its held item, so the Make It Rains are doing even more damage there. But I hope Trans at home and people getting ready for USC, I hope they dabble in the Porygon 2 world. I hope they try some of those strategies out there, because I think it's a fun Pokemon, and, you know, Scott's obviously in day 2 with P2.
Yeah, P2, it's definitely a good little Pokemon. I think the whole team is good, and Scott can attest to that as well. He is standing by with Gabby in the lounge for our interview.
Thank you so much, Sierra. I'm here with Scott Iwafuchi, our newestly crowned Day 2 competitor here in Vancouver. Congratulations. How's it feel?
Feels good. Have had some harder regional runs. Not to say that like discredit anyone, but just it's nice to be locked in early and not have to play that win and in that we all know is so stressful. So.
For sure. I mean, anything you can do to take your mental load down on such a long day already is certainly, you know, the goal.
Yes. My round 4, this team can do a lot of damage quickly, but it also can sometimes make the game last forever. And my round 4, 2 different games in that set went to time. So I was a little worried about stamina going into the rest of the day, but I'm still playing well and just happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, your most valuable Pokemon from this event and possibly from many events has been Porygon 2. So it's one of my favorite Pokemon. How did you arrive at using Porygon 2 in a regulation that really doesn't allow for it?
Right. So before the format started, I knew that Porygon 2 was coming back into the Pokedex, and it's one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. I used it to compete in previous formats. I've been playing since 2016 and used it during the Sun and Moon era. And when it came back, I was a little bit pessimistic about its odds of being able to compete with the likes of things like Urshifu, you know, the Genies, and all these Pokemon that pump out a bunch of damage. And Porygon 2's thing is taking no damage, and being really good at benefiting from trades, like doing more damage while it doesn't take as much. And so that was kind of my mindset going in. And my friend Dimitri, he wasn't able to make it here today, but he's one of my best friends. We were working on kind of just a joke idea of, it was this like Regidrago Comfy team, and we wanted a Trick Room setter, and we tried a couple ones, and they were like, meh, it's not really that great. And then we were like, what if we used Porygon 2, because we're losing to Fairy types and Grass types. And it was just a random off-the-wall idea that this one type does well against these things, and it would be cool to use Porygon 2. And the rest of the team obviously didn't really pan out, but we were like, whoa, Porygon 2 is doing some major damage. The poison typing is really, really convenient for it, offensively and defensively, having only 2 weaknesses, and those typings being on the rarer side of the meta, so like Psy-Spam and like stuff like Landorus. And so Porygon 2 can terrestrialize in a lot of different matchups and just sit there and do a ton of damage. Obviously, it didn't necessarily matter at the end of that first game, but I'm glad that I got to show the Poison Hat P2 off on stream. Yeah, I absolutely love using this Pokemon, and I'm so glad that it wound up working out, that not only was he fun to use, but it just is a very strong Pokemon.
So then when you abandoned the comfy Regidrago team and came to this like Porygon 2, like, yes, I want to use this Pokemon, how did you construct the rest of the team around it? Or did you just look at teams with 5 Pokemon that did well and then just try P2 in it?
Right, so I've been using Landorus Incarnate for a very long time. I brought it to the World Championships in Yokohama over the summer, and managed to make top cut there, which was super cool. And nobody had really been using Landorus, but when we hit Regulation F, it started picking up a lot of steam, and I thought it was just a really strong Pokemon in the format. And then Incineroar is a very integral part of the team, and with that returning, previous teams that I've used, like back in the Sword and Shield era, I had this Incineroar, Porygon 2, Amoonguss, Tapu Fini team that I really, really liked. and I thought that Incineroar Porygon 2 as a pairing, as a Fake Out plus Trick Room plus does good damage even when they're on the field after that first turn, would be a really strong pairing. And obviously, Amoonguss does a really good job of complementing the team defensively.
Yeah.
Incineroar and Amoonguss are just super strong together. And the team has gone through a bunch of different phases. You might have seen some of the European players using stuff like Ting Lu and
Yep.
Como-O, and those were my ideas originally. And
Yeah.
I got to talk with them, and it was very interesting to see like their takes on it and how they developed it. But I've been really enjoying Goldango. I think it's just such an insanely strong Pokemon. And then the whole team really has been putting in a lot of work, and I'm really proud of what I've been able to create with this format.
Yeah, it was very interesting to me going back to game 1 and game 2. Your whole strategy was built around how do I get Goldango to those nasty plots? How do I make sure that it is, basically undamageable on the field? And the Amoonguss and Incineroar synergy really worked well with that.
Yes, that matchup in particular, that team doesn't have a ton of ways to get Goldango off the field in a single turn. So you kind of saw that I hadn't even taken damage yet, but I targeted myself with Pollen Puff.
Yeah.
Because they have to spend multiple turns. That one turn where I get the nasty plot up, but I just get back the health that I lost, then that's really, really powerful in that matchup.
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to ask you about Ting Lu, because I know Chuppa brought it in game 1 against you. That really does seem like the Pokemon that would throttle this strategy, as its ability lowers the damage that special attacks do. What was your strategy around dealing with that Pokemon in particular?
So the way that the Ting Lu Dondozo matchup kind of goes a lot of the time is that the Ting Lu and Dondozo are really annoying for the thing next to Goldango, because they can taunt it, they can use Yawn to put me on a sleep timer, and then I have to kind of move around. And Goldango is the best way that the team has. Obviously, you have to click Nasty Plot first, but it's the best way that the team has to damage Ting Lu. So the whole idea is that Ting Lu is really annoying for everything that's not Goldango. So I'm going to spend the early game getting Goldango set up, and then do a ton of damage to Ting Lu so that eventually it gets off the board and the rest of my pieces can kind of move around freely. Otherwise, Sand Tomb makes it really hard for me to pivot around, which is what this team really likes to do.
Yeah, well, you played that matchup very well. Do you have any shout outs, anybody at home you'd like to give?
Oh boy, so many. This is my first time on stream, so I'm gonna try and do my best to get everyone. The group that I came here with, Cassie, Kaylin, Devin, Zach, Ben, Lincoln, Brendan, Nick, too many names to mention. I have this amazing community around me, and shout outs to my parents. It's been hard getting them to kind of understand where Pokemon fits in my life, but we've made a ton of progress, and I love you two so much, and I'm happy that the time that I put into this game is paying off.
For sure, and time spent making good memories as well.
Yes.
All right, Scott. Well, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck competing tomorrow and in your final round of Swiss, which will be coming up a little bit later, so make sure to stay tuned for that.